Good afternoon.
Well, Jeff, hi.
How are y'all?
Great.
Good. And I'm sorry, the FBI called me here about 2 hours ago because of the mass shootings that took place across the nation. We have a special meeting here at noon to discuss, more than likely have to discuss if we had something like that here, how we could respond to that. So that's unfortunately the kind of issues that we're facing these days. And so, when I go home at night, and before I go to bed, I pray for my family. I pray for the deputies that work for the county, and I pray that we don't have something like that happen here. Those are horrific events, and as a faith-based community, I'm sure that you guys do the same. I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic in a small town of Colwich, which is outside west of Wichita. I live in Andale now and belong to St. Joe Parish. At night for the Knights of Columbus. I've been not as active since I became sheriff with the Knights, just because of the time that it takes to do this profession. But I truly believe in my faith. I've raised my kids to believe in that as well. As a law enforcement officer, I see the good and the bad of folks. So sometimes I'm not as believing at times when I see some things, but then I'm reminded when I go to Sunday Mass as to why I need to be. But I really appreciate you guys having me here today, and hopefully with some of the stuff that I'll discuss, it's positive, some of the things that we're trying to do. If you've read in the paper or seen in the news, we were just talking, I don't watch the news, but I do look at the internet for stories that maybe I want to see. So the news media doesn't always report positive things. It's mainly the gotcha stuff and the stuff that sells, basically. However, for over 2 years, I and some other folks have been working on mental health issues and substance abuse issues, because that is the biggest, without a doubt, issues that we're facing nationwide, but specifically here in Sedgwick County. When I look at our jail population, and we keep monthly stats, and it's always between 71 and 73% of the inmates that come into the Sedgwick County Jail have a substance abuse problem. Between 30 and 33% have mental health issues. Talking with the DA's office, we believe, and this is probably a low estimate, at least 75% of the crimes that are committed here in Wichita, Sedgwick County is due to the influence of drugs, substance abuse, and the mental health issues. And so you look at a lot of the horrific crimes that have taken place, the child deaths, the murders that we've had, almost 100% of those are because they were high, wanting to get high, or was doing some type of drug robbery, those type of things. Even our DV homicides, usually the other person is under the influence or has mental health issues, or both, because they're co-occurring. A lot of the folks that have mental health issues don't want to admit that they have those things, don't want to outwardly portray that to people. So the way they cope is by taking a substance, which then causes the mental illness to become even worse and more horrific for them to deal with. So with that said, we realized that here a couple years ago, the Sheriff's Office, the ComCare via Christie, who does most of the mental health treatment here in Wichita, and the police department, along with a couple of other partners, started meeting, and after we started pointing fingers at each other because we're all inundated with this and wanted to say, well, why aren't you doing this? And why isn't the police doing this? Once we got over that, it took about 2 meetings, we figured out we're blaming the wrong folks. If you didn't know it, the mental health system here in the state of Kansas is broken. It's not only broke, money-wise, it's broken. And so whenever you hear the terms such as reform, like right now, juvenile justice reform, bail reform, criminal justice reform, I want to take you back to the 90s. How many of you all have lived here in Wichita since 90? Okay. Were we discussing mental health issues in the 90s? No, you didn't see it. One of the big reasons why is we had one of the best mental health programs ran by the state of Kansas in the United States. When they decided to do mental health reform, which was to close all the mental health hospitals, push it all back into the local communities, and oh, we'll fund you for that, that's when it started. They didn't fund it properly. The state mental health hospital had a moratorium put on. We used to have over 1,000 beds for mental health patients at the state level. We have 135 now at the state level. And because of that moratorium, because of the things that were going on at the state level, they now consider themselves just acute care. Acute care means that you have something acute going on, they'll treat you for a short amount of time and release you. That's ComCare here in Wichita. That was supposed to be their role. The state's role was supposed to be long-term or long-stay type care. And the one piece of bad news here, I hate to have to say this, but there is some folks in our society that do not belong in our society. They belong in a hospital being treated for their very serious mental illness. So what we have now is a system where we go make a call where someone is in a mental health crisis. Most of the time they don't want to go with us willingly, so we have to place them in cuffs. Part of the reason for the jail population growth is they were just taking them to jail. I have a pod in the Sedgwick County Jail that costs $750,000 a year that is a mental health pod that treats the folks with the most serious mental illnesses inside that pod just like they do at a psychiatric hospital. That's 50 beds. So we've kind of become the de facto mental health hospital here in the Wichita area, because until recently we had more beds than Via Christi did. Via Christi has put in a bunch of money into mental health and has opened up a new wing with more beds. But back to the state level, what goes on is that we'll take them to ComCare, we will get them assessed, then we have to take them to Via Christi to have them medically assessed, and then placement might take place. That occupies that sheriff's deputy for at least 2 hours. In my day, it was almost 6. So you have a cop off the street for one person. If that person fits the criteria, which is very stringent now at the state level, they will go to Osawatomie, but there's an extended wait because there's such a waiting list around the state of Kansas. They go up there for 3 to 5 days, they can force medicate, and they send them back to us. And then we recycle them back through that nonstop. So that's what we've been facing for several years. We originally started going and educating legislators, asking for legislation, asking for Medicaid to be, when you come into jail, you lose everything. You lose your Medicaid, you lose all that stuff. One of the things that we noticed at the jail, which was a gap of services, we would get most of these folks back on medications, and we cannot force Medicaid in the jail, by the way. It's by choice if they take them. In the jail setting, it's not like prison. They have all the rights intact. So we cannot force them to work. We can't force them to do any of that stuff because almost 90% of those folks that are in there have not been convicted of anything. So that's the way the system's supposed to work. But what we found is the folks that would level out, become normal again, they were due to be released, we would release them. What do you think they did? They went back home, started the process again. Because Medicaid wouldn't pick it up, or Medicare would not pick it up until they were placed back on Medicare, which means ComCare couldn't treat them because there's no paying source. So what we did on the back end is we got with ComCare. We know usually with most of these folks if they're going to be released about 2 weeks out, especially with mental health patients. So we get ComCare in, they get all the Medicare paperwork filled out, sent in. Now it's about a month because it takes about 30 days to reinstate Medicare. and at the time that they're released, we transport them to ComCare, and it's a soft release to ComCare, and they continue the treatment. And they put them on a plan, and they get them back integrated into society with medications and a plan. So we've been able to circumvent the system a little bit, but that's one of the things that we're asking the legislatures to do is not, they can suspend it like they do in Texas, which means their Medicare is suspended, it's not terminated. As soon as they're released, or we know they're going to be released, they kick it back on so that this can happen without any interruption in the service. That still hasn't taken place. We've been lobbying for that for 2 years. We've lobbied hard for really looking at the mental health system itself, turning Osawatomie into the hospital that needs to treat the northeast part of Kansas, and also long-term care, building a mental health hospital of about 40 beds right next to the jail here in Wichita, because we occupy about 45% of the space at Osawatomie. That's a lot of people from Wichita going up there. We could do that here. And then on top of that, we have services here. I mean, we have psychologists, we have psychiatric care, those type of things. It's not enough. We don't have enough here. But imagine living in Dodge City, Pittsburgh, Kansas, Hayes, Kansas. They have 0. And they got to transport their people here, or Osawatomie. So our suggestion is that they would open up satellite offices of about 18 beds in 4 different locations: Pittsburgh, Fort Hayes, Dodge City, and up in the Salina area. If those folks are too much for them to handle, because it would be about 18 beds, and you get some folks that are really bad off, they would bring them to Wichita for even more intense care. If it became long-term care, they would take them to Osawatomie. No money for that. What we hear from legislators is they understand, they've actually have listened the last 2 years, but we've seen no movement on the mental health side of the legislature. So at that point, we decided, you know what, we're not going to get any help from the state. We got to do this ourselves. So for 2 years, this committee was meeting, and then the substance abuse thing kind of reared its ugly head and had been part of the problem as well, but we're just trying to address mental health. So I started a committee to start looking at the substance abuse issue, which involved, about 60 other stakeholders. Move forward to last year with the baby deaths that were taking place, the murders, those type of things. Every one of those was people that had a mental health issue or were addicted to meth. Make no bones about it, we have some opioid stuff going on here. It is methamphetamine, plain and simple, that is affecting this county, actually this whole state. It's not the opioid crisis. However, we're trying to get prepared if that comes here, because I don't know how we would sustain anything if we have a methamphetamine and an opioid crisis at the same time. And so what we did was the commissioners got involved, decided, yes, we need to hire a couple people, because you have to remember the folks that were on this committee, we have day jobs. These were executives at Via Christi, ComCare, the Sheriff's Office, SAC, different entities that deal with this stuff, that we have our day jobs, so it was moving kind of slowly, to be real honest with you. So the county hired somebody to start taking care, addressing the mental health issues from this committee, and somebody from the substance abuse side of this. The substance abuse side is Wendy Hummel, that is assigned to me, or works for me. So where we went from there is going out, and we had a summit on the substance abuse issues. We had over 120 people, different entities come to that particular summit, give us great ideas. We've had a mental health symposium where the same thing happened with mental health issues. And what was decided is that we were going to form a 501c3. We were going to form a board, and we were going to attack these 2 issues at the same time. And so that board has been put together. We're working on the bylaws now, and we are applying for the 501c3. But in the meantime, the 2 groups are moving forward doing different things in the community. Okay, so there's the ICT thing where you paired up a police officer, a fireman, and an EMS person that just launched July 30th. That was part of what we need to start pushing forward. What's so important about that is how I explained to you before the process. Well, now that group goes out to those type of calls live time, so it frees up other officers from having to be there. You have ComCare, who's making an assessment of the person's mental health issues and whether they should leave them in place or whether we should transport them. And if they're going to be transported, we have an EMT there that can do the medical screening so we can avoid the hospital. You have to understand that Via Christi, where they do the assessments for the mental health stuff, is also in their ER. They have wait times of 19 people, about 4 times a week, needing mental health treatment. They're inundated. So we had to relieve that aspect of it as well. In the first week of ICT, what they've seen is 65% of the people that they've come in contact with, they've left in place, and they're putting them on a plan, and they haven't made repeat calls. They've only had to transport 9% of the people. That used to be flip-flopped. About 85% of the people transported, either to jail or to ComCare or the hospital. So I'm excited about that project. I think it's going to be a huge help in this community. It's a pilot project right now. But just to give you, we're doing a drug teen summit in September or October. Partnering with DEA, we'll bring in a bunch of students from different area schools. We'll probably have it at Coke Arena down at WSU, where we talk about substance abuse, we talk about those type of things. So we're still moving forward with different projects, but together we're wanting to combat the entire problem and have more of a voice in Topeka. One of the main things that is going to come out of this is there is a project down in San Antonio, Texas. Several of us have gone down there to visit. Basically what they did down there, they had a bunch of Valero and Coke Industries, and some of those folks donated a lot of money. And what they did down there is they built basically a community. That's where all the mental health treatment takes place, that's where the substance abuse takes place, and that's where the homeless stays. Every service that you can imagine is located there. So we're trying not necessarily to build the San Antonio model, but all of our services here in Wichita are scattered when it comes to homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. In fact, I don't even know who all does substance abuse. We still don't know who all does the counseling here in Wichita. And how many of those folks actually will treat you if you don't have insurance. SAC, which is housed with the county. And so that's a problem. So what we're trying to do is come together as this entity of about 150 different nonprofits and other organizations that provide these services and come up with a plan to either build or rebuild an area that will provide all those services, plus the nonprofits having a location in there to provide the services that they bring to the table. Lord's Diner, Open Door, all these other entities that provide services to the homeless and the folks that have these issues. It has been very successful down in San Antonio. They were slated to build a $300 million prison. When they started this 17 years ago, they still haven't built the prison, and their jail is only 90% occupancy. And there are 1 million plus people. I have 1,600 inmates sitting in the jail right now, and we're 500,000. I've been out to Mecklenburg County, which is Charlotte, North Carolina. They did a lot of different programs out there, which they had the space to do that because it's kind of out in the wilderness is where their jails are. So they did a horticultural program where the inmates farm and do all of the plants that are given to Walmart to sell. They earn certificates, they have jobs when they come out. They did a carpentry program because they noticed in their particular city that they didn't have enough carpenters. So they taught them how to be a carpenter, had all the tools there, those type of things. And they got out and got jobs. They shut down one of their jails. There are 1.3 million people. They had 1,100 inmates.
Oh my.
Where is this?
Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, North Carolina. And so we have instilled some programs inside the facility, a mentoring program, the SCORE program, NA, all that other stuff we've had for a while. We don't have the room to do those kind of programs. However, one thing that we did do is, we contract out medical services, food, and some other services. Well, in recent RFPs, what we asked for is, hey, we know you can do food. What are you going to do for our inmates, though? And so the most recent food contract that we got, they did a survey in the city of Wichita. Believe it or not, people that bake goods, there's a shortage here in Wichita. So what they decided to do is that they would train inmates on how to be bakers. And so they bake all of our goods there. And I will tell you, it's really good, our desserts and our rolls and those type of things. They earn a certificate, and at the time that they're getting released, they contact that employer that's short of bakers, and they place them in employment there. They also do commissary for us, which means inmates can order items off of commissary, candy bars, pops, those type of things. Well, there has to be people that's going to stock those and deliver those. Well, the inmates do that, and they earn certificates, and then they try to help place them in Walmarts or Targets or those type of things to do the same type of job. So we are trying some things that we can do within the facility that doesn't cost us any money, and it seems to work. But what I will tell you is we keep recidivism statistics. And so 1 year after being released from jail, 32% are coming back. And we don't keep track of why they came back. Did they get booked back into the jail? 47% after 2 years and 62% after 3. So that's the folks that are coming to jail, let alone the folks that have never been to jail and are committing crimes for the first time and have been caught and coming to jail. It is growing to a point where we are overcrowded. We ship inmates out of county all the time. The problem is the state system's overcrowded. So they're shipping out inmates. They pay $71 a day to these jails. We pay $35, so we think happens to us. See you later, have a good time. When they quit, come on back. So now we're back out in western Kansas, delivering inmates, which is transportation costs, 2 deputies to do that. We had 190 out of county today. So, and that was after we opened up, we work release transferred to community corrections that would open up that, we call it an annex now, to actually house prisoners instead of folks that came to us that also went out and found jobs, and it was just kind of they had to come sleep at night with us instead of going home. That added 180 beds. So if it wasn't for that, we would be over 300 some odd inmates out of county. And the cost of that is outrageous. I mean, it's a $3-4 million budget to be able to do that. So we've got to start thinking differently about what we're doing. First off, if we're going to do criminal justice reform, I will tell you, and if Mark Bennett was standing here, because he did a huge study into this, the mantra that we got too many people in prison for simple possession of marijuana and for property crimes, untrue. So when you hear that, I'm going to give you the information to say, this is how I know it's untrue. Last year, there's only 6 people that entered the prison system for marijuana charges. And as Mark Bennett put it, it's not for the marijuana charge. It's because of all the other crimes they did in the past that finally that got them to prison. He puts it as, it takes almost a history of BTK to end up in prison for possession of marijuana, plain and simple. Property crime wise, most of those folks, if your house gets burglarized tonight and we catch them, they're not going to prison, folks. It does not happen. So when we're talking property crimes, larcenies, burglaries, vandalisms, those type of things, if they go to prison, it's because they violated their probation and parole several times, they end up going to prison and spending the rest of their sentence in prison, 3 to 6 months. So it's a revolving door for them. The other 70% of the people that are in there, that's the murderers, the rapists, the child molesters, those folks. They're there for a long time. So the mantra that, oh, well, if we do all this other stuff on criminal justice reform, I don't believe in it. I'll be honest with you. If you're going to do that, though, you better have something on the back end. And that back end that I've been talking to legislators about is a state-ran substance abuse center here in the state, plain and simple. We've been fighting the war on drugs since the 80s. We're not winning, and we're not going to win. We tried to wrest ourselves out of it in the 90s and early 2000s. That didn't work. We have got to give the judges the opportunity. I can't put you in prison because of the grid. It's a scheduling grid to say if this person is eligible to go to prison or not. Okay? The judges have to abide by that. They can't deviate from it. So what that means is that if most of our folks, 90% of our folks that are committing property crimes, they have a drug habit. That's how they're supporting their drug habit. So even if they're arrested and charged for the first time with burglary, actually it takes 3 separate convictions to actually go to prison for burglary, and most of the time they're not going to prison unless they violated something. If they're going to do that, then give the judge the opportunity to say, you have a drug habit, I'm sentencing you to 6 months or a year in the state-ran drug facility because I can't put you in prison. And at least we might have a fighting chance of getting these folks off the substance that they're using and back into society being productive. If you're gonna do this, you gotta have something else on the back end, because just saying, well, we're not gonna put people in prison for drug charges and property crimes. We already got kids, because they've done the juvenile justice reform where kids aren't going away now, saying, what are you gonna do to me? You just send me back to my parents and I'm good. That's already happening with the juvenile justice reform. And so those are a lot of issues that are facing the state of Kansas right now that we're having to deal with in law enforcement. And so unless we step up in our own community, we're not gonna survive this. I'll just be real honest with you. The good thing is that we have a lot of people in this community that also believe in that philosophy and that are willing to do the hard work and try to get some things done here, like what I talked about that's going on in San Antonio. Because that's a model that worked for them. I'm not saying that we're going to do exactly what that model is. We want to do it the Wichita way, which means we're going to look at the different avenues that we have available to us, try to raise money, because one thing, I'm not a politician, by the way. It's pretty easy for me to be the sheriff because it's what the law says, period. And most people that know me, the other politicians, they kind of avoid me because of that, because I just don't play those games. Yes, I have to run for office, so I guess I'm a sort of a politician at that point. I don't like doing that, but that's part of this job. However, we even have all of the city council and the county commission completely on board on this issue as well. And that's hard to do sometimes with the city and county. But it's such a big issue that everybody agrees we have got to do something ourselves, or all of the services right now that we provide is inundated, it's overflowing, and there's not enough funding. So we've got to do things differently. So we're hoping that we have a group here, Author and Bradley, and WSU is working on our strategic plan. We have to have a plan set in place with measurements, with goals, before we go out and try to raise money from companies to say this is our vision. And so we're working on that right now, and hopefully in October we'll be rolling that out. WSU has been a huge assistance of ours because they're having focus group meetings with different entities within the community, and then bringing that information back to help build the strategic plan as well. There is a ton of statistics between law enforcement, the hospital, ComCare, SAC, that we need to really get a grasp of because we're all separate in that arena. And so they're putting together all those statistics for us so we have a baseline so that if we do, if we can start doing this, are we seeing a reduction or are we wasting money? I'm here to tell you, we're gonna see a reduction. Can you imagine if we just took 20% of the people that have a substance abuse problem and take them out of that issue? The money savings alone, besides the human aspect of it, is unbelievable. It costs $76,000 a day to open the jail doors every day. Okay? So you take one person that has a substance abuse problem, went out and committed a burglary. Takes the officer's time, the investigator's time, them staying in jail, them released on pretrial release, those folks' time, and then the cost of a lot of them wear the electronic monitoring, that cost, the judge's time, the DA's time, the post-release people's time for probation, the public defender's time on one person. We're trying to figure out how much right now one person costs. But I'm here to tell you, it's probably up in the $30,000 range, let alone if you incarcerate them in prison. Because it costs a year about $34,000 at the state level to incarcerate a person. So when you take a look at it in that aspect, 20% of my population could be reduced. That's millions of dollars that can be put back in to the front side of this of education, prevention, and treatment. And that's where we got to go. And this is coming from, I've worked at the police department for 24 years. Okay, worked in some of the most crime-ridden areas, in the gang unit, the homicide unit, all those areas. So this is coming from a person that says, I am here because if you're a victim of a crime, I'm the one that is supposed to protect you. So they go to jail and they should go to prison, period. Done it for 30 years now, it ain't working. So we've got to change our mindset a little bit. I'm not saying that we don't hold people responsible. We absolutely hold people responsible. But we can't just release them back out into society without some of these other plans in place, plain and simple, because they're just going to keep doing it. One other thing that I'll discuss with you that has just started, as you know, we've had a lot of child deaths here in Wichita in the last couple of years, murders. DCF, the Department of Children and Families, have a extremely difficult job, okay? So they get calls every day, tons of calls just in this area, of neglect, abuse, poor living conditions, those type of things. So they have to go out and they have to assess whether that child is in an unsafe environment or the parents just are, they're poor, they can't afford a lot, they don't have enough food, those type of things. And so there's been gaps though, there's been holes, and that's mainly between law enforcement and DCF, because we'll make a call out there and take a look at it, and we're not the experts. And so we might leave those children there because we don't have enough probable cause to believe that we can take them. But we didn't know on the back end, DCF has had 8 open cases on these folks. That could make a difference for us in saving that child. And so what is going on now is that DCF got some money in, and they're going to pay for one position for us, 2 positions for the police department, where we will have a DCF worker embedded with the sheriff's office, which means we have full access to those files. So if a deputy at 3 o'clock in the morning makes one of those calls, they can call our records section and say, hey, is there any open DCF cases here? Yeah, there's one for abuse, there's one for neglect, and what they see in there is a filthy house, but the parents are, oh, please don't take my kid, we're good parents, we're just downtrodden, blah, blah, blah. Hey, I'd rather take the kid and have to give him back than not take the kid and work the homicide. So we're gonna err on the same side of caution. That's how I've always been when it comes to kids. DCF, where they get the bad reputation, is they take those kids because of that. They have to do that every day. They have to make that assessment right then and there. They get accused of kidnapping, they get accused of all this crazy stuff. Who's protecting the kid? That's what our job is. And I'm sorry, that's what society's job is. They can't protect themselves at 3 years old. So I really think that that's going to be a program that hopefully will fill some of those gaps, will 100% prevent child deaths. No. I got asked by a commissioner yesterday, how do we have it here in Wichita that we never have a child death again? Impossible. Okay? The fact of the matter is, unless every parent that is getting ready to have a kid has to go through some mandatory parenting class to learn how to be a parent, even then that's not going to stop it. And so I don't want to get on my soapbox here, but the problem is that the responsibility of parenting has waned, plain and simple. I mean, you all have parents, you all know how you were raised, I know how I was raised. And it's not everybody, but there's a segment of society that they don't know how to parent or choose not to. And that's part of our problem in society right now. And these kids grow up in abusive relationships, seeing their parents abuse drugs, seeing their parents go off to jail, those type of things. And that's normal for a lot of these kids. Come down to the county jail and watch our visitation area. It's no big deal to have 12, 15 kids running around there. Like it's a normal day to see their loved one that way. And when you're raised that way and you think it's normal, you're going to emulate what your parents do. And that's part of the problem we're having. So with that, I'll end, but I'll take any questions real quick.
Kind of deportation of illegals. I heard you talk about that once as fake news again. Can you cover deportation?
Okay. Yeah.
You guys.
The fact of the matter is that we have a lot of illegal immigrants in this city. There's no doubt about it. We do. The only folks that are actually looking at being deported are the ones that committed crimes. And I truly believe in that. If you've come to this country illegally, but then you violate the law in this country, well, then I don't think you need to be here. We have enough people violating the law. Is ICE going after the folks that are simply here illegally, trying to raise their family, working, those type of things? No. Not here, they're not. We as the Sheriff's Office, we don't have the authority to make those arrests. We don't have the authority to enforce federal law when it comes to immigration. So do we actively go out and look for illegal immigrants and stuff? No. Do we look for folks that have warrants? Absolutely. If they happen to be illegal and have a warrant, then so be it. Now, with that said, ICE hasn't done it for quite a while, but in the past, when I was with the police department, they would do different type of enforcement type events, and they would ask for assistance. We as a law enforcement office here in Sedgwick County, we're going to assist them because we're law enforcement. And so some of the stuff that you're seeing or reading about, at the border is a little bit different because they're crossing the border illegally, so that's being handled a little bit differently. In the interior part, they're going after the criminal element of that segment of society. Plain and simple, that's what's going on.
Would that be, I heard this morning on the news a discussion about, I believe it was in western Kansas, where several meat packing facilities were surrounded and they were hauling people away. In that processing, would they be looking for the criminal element like you just talked about?
Yeah, I don't know what particular thing you're talking about, but I know in the past, ICE have done some of those here, where there is an employer that's, they're not paying the wages that they should be paying, they're not doing all the other stuff, the taxes, those type of things. They got cheap labor sitting there. And so ICE has gone in and shut the place down and then taken the illegals out of there. Whether or not they were deported, that I couldn't tell you. But that has happened here, but it's been several years ago. I wouldn't doubt if it happens again, if they find another place that's doing that. How they would separate them out, if they have criminal histories or if they've committed a crime and they got a warrant, I can tell you those people are going to be deported. If the folks are here illegally and don't have that kind of criminal background or warrant, they'll go through the same process everybody else does. And a lot of times, I'll tell you, without getting too deep into it, the impression of a lot of law enforcement was, because that's a civil action that's taking place. It's a whole different process of criminal side. And so they go in front of a magistrate judge, and the judge says, okay, show back up to court on this particular day, and they release them. The impression was 70-75% of those people never show back up. That's false. I didn't know that until 2 years ago. And that's what led to a lawsuit against ICE. 85% of those people that are released back into the community show back up to court. That amazed me. And that also told me, hey, these folks are here for a better life, to raise their family, and to get a job. And they work. So they're coming back because they want to stay. So you can be, whatever spectrum that you're on with illegal immigration, but those are the facts. So, yes.
This is probably a bit of a stretch, but, we got a ton of churches around here, and as I listen to you talk, I'm like, golly, if we could just have the churches come together, like all of your committees are coming together, or your organizations, what level could the church play
Huge
if
level.
we were together or had a committee or something where we can all unite in helping you guys?
Yeah, down there in San Antonio, literally, they have built an apartment complex. They have housing. They have their streets, a post office, and a Christian church, because that's what happened down there.
You're saying all of the churches came together?
I'm not saying all the churches came together, but they do provide spiritual services on this campus.
Who spearheaded that? How would you
I can
get
find
into
out.
that?
I don't know, because they took us for a quick tour through this whole complex, and I noticed that. So I thought, well, they obviously involved the faith-based community somewhere in this. But it was such a quick tour, and we were really focused in on the mental health care and the substance abuse care.
That may be good data to have as you guys look at.
No, I'd agree with you. Yep, I'd agree with you, because, we've involved some, we've reached out to Ministerial League and some other folks for the faith-based part of this, and some of them are on the committees. So there is representation in the committees with faith-based community. One of my goals for the strategic agenda is to task those folks with the spiritual or with the faith-based community to get all you guys together, because that's not something that I can do. Well, you all won't come together, just like the nonprofits we're finding out won't, but at least maybe there could be a segment that could help guide us through this.
What other recommendation would you make on that? That is a wonderful, from not being, say something to us, the faith-based community again. What else would you be looking for there?
Well,
Would help.
I can tell you the one thing that could have an immediate impact on us at the jail is we have a Christian Ministries organization which provides faith-based teachings and all those type of things to the inmates. Plus, they take care of all of our getting Bibles to them, those type of things. Not enough volunteers, and they don't have very much money. So they're scrambling every month to figure out how to keep providing these services. I know they're inmates in jail. I get that, but they're also people, and some of them do change. And they're changed because of the volunteers that have come in and have helped them realize the error of their ways and have found Christ again. And so that's an immediate need. I think over time, once we can get this a little bit more organized with a plan and those type of things, I think that there is an absolute part of that agenda needs to be faith-based, plain and simple. Because everybody in this room that preaches or gives sermons and stuff, those are the folks on substance abuse and mental health care. They see our people every day, because they got to have that guidance and they got to have that strength, because they can't do it themselves. So, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, perfect. How's your time?
I got to get going.
Okay, so that's what I thought. That's why I stood up. I stood up because we want to pray for you. And
I've talked about this before. We're going to start it in October, maybe even the end of September. But the police chief has given me their list of policemen okay? And we're gonna be circulating that to the churches to then break up to pray for them. I just, asked Sheriff Easter before we got started, is there any chance we can get the sheriff's list? And so he said yes. And so over time here, we're gonna get these lists, first responders maybe, you know what I'm just saying, out to the churches so that you can literally take a name. And then what my thought is, we're gonna do it every year because they change who's really a sheriff or who's, you know what I'm saying, with the department. And so we'll need a fresh list, all right? So just one thing that we are gonna chase. And then we need to pray for you because you gotta go, all right? So we circle you.
Lord, I pray your word has instructed us to give honor and respect to those who are in authority over us, those who carry the sword for good and not for evil. Lord, you are blessed